I would now like to introduce today's presenters. Parul Jain is the Vice President at Everest Group Global Sourcing Team, leading the firm's locations and workforce advisory practice. With extensive experience advising clients, she specializes in workforce transformation, location selection, vendor strategy, GBS growth, peer benchmarking, and go-to-market strategy. Amir Khan is a senior analyst within Everest Group's global sourcing team, contributing to his expertise in advising clients on topics such as location optimization, workforce strategy, and cost benchmarking across functions, industry verticals, and regions. Sumit Kumar serves as a practice director on the global sourcing team at Everest Group, overseeing the firm's workforce and location advisory and research practice. With a wealth of experience, he advises companies on location assessment, workforce strategy, peer benchmarking, and go-to-market strategy. And with that, I would like to turn things over to Parul.
Thank you. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all. Welcome to the much-awaited locations webinar. We will be covering key observations and expectations for enterprises and service providers pertaining to their services delivery portfolio from a workforce and a locations delivery standpoint. We will start with the current market pulse, where we are right now, what has led to the growth of where we are. We will then do a fair bit of globe trotting, covering one region at a time and sharing distilled insights on what is brewing up in these regions, and then move to the top 5 trends that are going to impact location decisions taken by leaders across all geos and verticals alike. We will then wrap up and have some Q&A of all the pieces that you've been sharing on the side, starting with the first piece around the current market pulse. Now, while the global services industry had a strong post-pandemic rebound during 2021, 2022, it recorded double-digit revenue growth in these years. Its growth rate significantly declined in 2023, with the revenue growth of 3 to 5%. However, if you were to kind of look how do we see the sentiment going forward, the term that we are seeing being used all pervasive is cautious optimism. Yes, there is going to be growth, but there are going to be factors that need to be accounted for, risks that need to be managed in order to sustain that growth. Interestingly, the trends vary if you were to look at this particular kind of growth between providers and GBS or global business services. While the service provider revenue was significantly impacted by a pullback in discretionary spending and some project delays cancellations, the GBS model, however, grew significantly both in terms of new center setups and increasing headcount in existing centers. And it is also likely to maintain that momentum going forward in 2024. Now, as we sit at almost end of the quarter of 2024, the global services industry, yes, seems to be improving, though there are multiple uncertainties around macroeconomic conditions, geopolitical environment, the impact of the buzzword Gen AI, and innumerable black swan events. In short, the sentiment of cautious optimism runs all supreme. We also believe 2024 will be the year of milestones from a global services standpoint, with the industry clocking about $300 billion in revenue and surpassing the 10 million FTE mark by the end of the year. Now, from a geography standpoint, we see kind of nuances across different regions. On the left, you see the global services market divided by different regions on the basis of headcount. And on the right, the same market, but kind of showing the difference in the number of delivery center setups that have happened across the years. Note APAC refers to Asia Pacific market. Europe refers to here both the Central and Eastern kind of Europe region. Americas includes the Latin America and Caribbean, and MEA is Middle East and Africa. Our team tracks these data points on a consistently basis and is able to pull out these insights. What we do see here is that APAC, Asia Pacific, continues to hold its lion's share. we've seen some trend more of shrinkage when it came to the number of center setups that happen in Europe. That is slightly improving or has improved in 2023, majorly more towards the westward winds that we did see happening, especially in locations like Portugal and Spain. But overall, the share, if you compare it to 3 years back, we are seeing a declining trend in the European market. On the Americas front, if you were to kind of talk about the key locations that are actually witnessing interest, the answer varies or the trends vary at a region or a country level. So there is an interesting or a more strong winds towards nearshoring. So we see a lot of outsourcing, offshoring that is happening to locations like Mexico, Colombia, for IT, for even in Costa Rica for more of the complex and nuanced kind of roles that's coming up. There is more interest in the Middle East and Africa region as well. That's being largely led more by the service providers and is kind of waiting to be translated across an all industry growth. And I talk about the headcount growth as well. With that, let me now pass it on to Amir to talk about the nuances underlying or kind of coloring the picture that we talked about.
Thanks, Parul. Moving on, if we look at the current business landscape, we see that cost and margin pressures are becoming increasingly very prominent, which is prompting a surge in the offshoring trend. And we expect that this trend is going to intensify further as organizations seek to reduce their financial burden and enhance profitability. According to a recent survey on key issues study for 2024, we found out that cost and margin pressures emerged as the foremost challenge which the business leaders are facing in 2024, which even surpassed the other key challenges from the previous years, such as slowdown in demand, etc. Another critical insight that we got was in terms of the location risk and the geopolitical uncertainty. So back in 2023, geopolitical risk and uncertainty was ranked at 8th position in our key issues survey 2023. But if we look at this year, we see that it has ascended to 3 positions and coming at in the top 5 challenges list. Now, this also underscores the fact that the given geopolitical uncertainties currently will have some potential impact on the supply chain, on the market access, and also the regulatory environment in many locations. Looking ahead also, in terms of the headcount growth, which is anticipated in 2024, we saw that, and we predict that the most of the anticipated headcount growth will predominantly be driven by the offshore locations, although the pace might be slower as compared to 2023. But despite this deceleration, we believe that the offshore destination is going to experience substantial expansion this year, and potentially at a rate which would be anticipated double of the nearshore locations. Next, if we talk about the major offshore nearshore hubs, we see that India continues to dominate and retain the position for the last 4 years in terms of the new center setups, despite showing some dip in 2023, but is still maintaining its lead in the chart. Followed by, again, Philippines, which has again continued to retain its second position from the last year. We do see some entrants in the top 10, such as Ireland, citing the uncertainties in the Eastern Europe. We see some increase in the new setups in regions such as Portugal. Then we see some regions in the Latin America, such as Costa Rica, coming up in the top 10 charts. On the other hand, some mature locations such as Poland, Mexico, Canada have seen some dip and moved some places below in the top 10 chart. But net, we believe that India, Philippines, and the mature locations such as Poland, Mexico are going to be the top locations, for the new center setups this year as well. With that, and before moving forward, let me introduce today's complimentary offer. So we are offering a complimentary locations check for the participants today, whereby the webinar participants can select 3 locations from the given set of 46 offshore nearshore locations, and you can select 1 function out of the 4 functions, which are IT ADM, IT infra, contact center, and F&A. And we will provide a comprehensive talent cost risk assessment, incorporating the cost of operations, the operating and business risk, the entry and employed talent pool. And to request your complimentary locations check, please indicate your interest in the post-webinar survey and also on the link which you can see in the chat box right now. Also, I would like to mention that this analysis is powered by our own in-house AI-powered platform, Talent Genius, which has a vast corpus of 1,000+ roles across the mentioned 4 functions, covering 100+ cities. With that, moving on to the next section. All right. So let us quickly have a glance through some of the major offshore, nearshore geographies and look at some of the regional snapshot and see how these geographies spanned out in 2023. So starting with Asia Pacific, we see that India and Philippines continue to dominate Asia Pacific region in terms of the total share of center setups, accounting for roughly 80% of the total setups in Asia Pacific, followed by China and Malaysia. If we look at some of the key global services stats for 2023, a very strong headcount supporting the global services industry, accounting for roughly 6.5 million. Decent growth rate was observed as compared to 2022, accounting to roughly 3%. In terms of center setup also, we saw 200+ centers set up in 2023 alone. If we further deep dive into the distribution of these new center setups, we see that 71% of these setups were in tier 2-3 cities, which definitely indicates a growing preference of tier 2-3 locations in these regions, tapping the untapped talent pool and also the diversification of the existing hubs. In terms of the GBS versus SP distribution of these new centers, we saw that roughly 3/4 of these were enterprise setups, setting up their own GCC or GBS centers in these locations. If we look at some of the key drivers for 2024 for Asia Pacific, definitely the increasing cost and margin pressures, the strategic focus on creating mega hubs and the targeting newer hubs in these regions. And lately, we are also witnessing a lot of increasing demand in terms of language delivery in Asian languages, which is also contributing and will be a major factor for driver in 2024. Moving on to the next geography and looking at the Central and Eastern Europe, we saw that in 2023, most of the new setups in this region was predominantly in Poland, Romania, Czech Republic, and Hungary. And together, these 4 countries contribute to roughly 75% of the total setups in this region. In terms of some key stats, decent headcount supporting the global industry, roughly over 2 million. Strong growth was observed from 2022 to 2023, reaching up to 4%. In terms of setups, around 50 new center setups were observed in 2023. In terms of the distribution of these setups, we saw a nearly equal representation in terms of tier 2-3 versus tier 1. But again, similar to the Asia Pacific, we are witnessing an increasing traction to set up in tier 2-3 locations. Also, in terms of the GBS versus SP bifurcation, similar trends as we saw in Asia Pacific. A majority of the setups were enterprise setups setting up their own GBS GCCs. Talking about some of the key drivers for this region, the increasing regulations on the data protection, cybersecurity, and a lot of regional norms coming up, especially in the Eastern Europe and overall Europe, if I may say, which is again prompting some increase in the setups in this region. Another reason is the need to balance the proximity versus the cost effectiveness in these regions. And also, lastly, the growing need for multilingual delivery in a lot of the European languages to meet the emerging demand. Moving on to the next geography, Latin America. So Latin America continues to be very appealing for the North America firms, particularly because of its very close proximity, both in terms of the culture and geography. Again, in Latin America, we see the majority of the share holds in the top 4 countries, including Mexico, Costa Rica, Colombia, and Brazil. In terms of, again, key stats, decent headcount supporting the industry, good headcount growth rate, and the global services market growth rate observed in 2022. And also, in terms of the center distribution, we see that the service providers and the GBS have nearly equal share in Latin America, which was different from what we observe in Asia Pacific and Central and Eastern Europe. So we do see that increasing trend for even service providers, which are coming up in increasing number in the Latin American region. Talking about the key drivers quickly, again, this has always been a competitive low-cost alternative to offshore regions, particularly for the North American headquarter firms, due to its greater proximity to both culture and geography. However, the recent election in this region, especially in US, also in a few countries in Latin America, might have some impact and might influence the investment decisions. So that will be interesting to watch for this region.
And this is interesting, particularly for Latin America, right? Because we've seen more of the service providers dominate that market. This is the first year where we are also seeing enterprises expanding their operations in the region. Otherwise, most of the GBS organizations, high concentration in the Costa Rican market. Now we're seeing them set up operations in Mexico, Colombia, Brazil, experimenting with Argentina, etc. So interesting shift of trend that we have noticed in the Latin America region for 2023.
Right. Thanks for adding that, Parul. With that, moving on to the next region, Middle East and Africa. So Middle Eastern Africa has been getting significant traction in the recent times due to the entire dynamics in this region, the shift from the oil-based economy to digitalization, a digital transformation-based economy, and other revenue sources. Again, talking about the location snapshot, Egypt, South Africa, Israel, Morocco contributed to the maximum share of the total centers in this region. In terms of the stats of the global services, decent headcount, nearly 500,000 headcount supporting the global services industry, decent headcount growth rate, and the global services market growth rate. In terms of the center setup, the majority of the centers currently in this region is still in the tier 1 cities, because we see still the talent pool has not been tapped to its full potential. So majority of the setups we still see in the tier 1 cities itself, and a smaller share in the tier 2, 3. In terms of the GBS and service provider split, again, somewhat similar scenario as compared to the Latin America, roughly an equally split in both these. Talking about some of the key drivers, I think the most important driver for this region would be the strong government push, both if I talk about the Saudi vision or the Egypt ICT 2020-2030 vision. So a lot of stronger push from these governments in this region, and also the increasing economic activity in the UAE, the entire Saudi region is again demanding, increasing the need for local delivery from these regions, which can be a key driver and a watch out for 2024. With that, let us move to the next section. And let us look at some of the key themes in terms of the location and workforce that the leaders, both service providers and GBS leaders, need to watch out for 2024. And before jumping into the key themes, let me ask a quick poll to the audience for today's webinar. So what are your key focus areas as you frame your location and workforce strategy for 2024? And we have already started receiving some inputs from the audience. And Sumit, meanwhile, we are receiving inputs. I would like to ask you, what is your take on this question? Which of the following options do you feel should be the top 2 in terms of the considerations?
Thank you, Amir, and hi, everyone. Based on my interaction with global firms, I think all of these issues are very important right now. I'm really very interested to see what result unfolds here. But if you ask me just the top 2, maybe geopolitical uncertainty might make the cut because of all the political elections. You talk about any geography, there are political elections happening, and rebalancing the existing portfolio. These are the two themes which at least I hear in a lot of conversations. But again, that doesn't mean the remaining themes are not important. Those are equally important. But let's
Right.
see what results have come. Okay, as I was telling Amir, all of these will be equally important. So based on the results, clearly seeing that uh, the first four ones are the ones which are like very commonly addressed and very pertinent themes which all the participants have talked about, and insourcing outsourcing mix is like just behind the first four. So interesting. Let's see how things unfold, and let me start covering the nuances
I
as
think
well.
I think it's a clear message that the location decisions have never been more complicated now than they have been ever, because there are too many variables that keep on shifting, resulting in, multiple factors that need to be considered while selecting a new location or balancing work across the existing location. So interesting space to be in right now because of so many moving pieces.
And that is the first actually theme that we were talking about, that the decisions are actually getting a lot complicated. And not only because of the internal firm factors, but so many external factors are out there in the market. So let me share one instance, and I think this page will be a very interesting one that we built. We have a lot of members, and we receive inquiries and queries from members on location strategy and workforce strategy. We saw that while the large countries, cities still are there in this mix, so you will see India, you will see US, UK, Philippines, those are still there. The likes of Bangalore, Manila, Hyderabad, Chennai, all are there in the mix. But beyond that, there are multiple new names which are catching the eyes of location and workforce strategy leaders. And these emerging names are not specific to any geography or country. So not specific to, let's say, an offshore region or a nearshore region or an onshore region. The quest for new location is as global as things can be. And then generally, we are seeing that there is a significant shift that is starting to happen. And this is happening over the past 4 or 5 years. There is a lot of movement that is happening to tier 2, 3 locations globally. Now, tier 2, 3 locations are the ones which are, let's understand that tier 2, 3 locations are the ones which are not the most prominent global delivery destination in your respective markets. So maybe in the case of India, for example, if Bangalore is a tier 1 location, the likes of Ahmedabad, Bhubaneswar, and you might be seeing some of these names over here on the page, those will be like a tier 2, 3 location. So the reason for this shift is not only reasons are multiple, but main ones are like high market congestion in tier 1, high cost of operations in tier 1. There is a very high attrition as well going on in tier 1 markets. And post COVID, a lot of talent has moved to tier 2, 3 cities. So there is a lot of untapped talent potential out there that you can actually tap into. So we have listed some of the common names over here. But yeah, typically, if you start seeing by region, you will see in Asia Pacific, in India, Vietnam, and Philippines, you will see some of the tier 2, 3 locations which are picking up pace. In Europe, right from eastern part of the region to the western part of the region, you will see there are a lot of new centers, a lot of new cities that are coming up, likes of Cluj, Malaga in Spain coming up. And within Americas, there are multiple pockets which are experiencing traction, not only in the Latin America market, but in the onshore markets as well. So the likes of within United States and Canada, you will see likes of Denver, Tampa, Waterloo coming up. In Latin America, the thing is that most of the center setups, most of the growth is still concentrated in tier 1 cities, to be honest. But there are tier 2, 3 cities as well picking up. For example, Tijuana over here. It's a great location in Mexico where we are seeing a lot of contact center work being moved to. So again, a mix of things happening. And with this, I will move on to the next theme, and it's more on the geopolitical uncertainty. So during the conversation, which when Amir was presenting the poll, we talked about that geopolitical uncertainty is at an all-time high right now. And the major thing is that there are so many geopolitical events happening around us that these events are extremely important to incorporate in your location's workforce strategy. But at the same time, it's very difficult and challenging to stay up to date on all the events and their potential impact on the location workforce decisions. So we have listed some top 5 themes that we have been hearing in the market, which will have some of the greatest impact on your location's workforce strategy decision. And the first one we should be talking about is elections. Name a geography of your interest, you will hear that election is happening. Be it India, US, UK, everywhere it's an election year. So just gear up for that. In Latin America, there are so many countries where elections are going to happen. So it will be interesting to see how things unfold over there after the election. Beyond this, the tensions between US and China, they continue to persist. And there seems to be limited respite even in 2024. So that is the two of the world's behemoths have this challenge, and that is going to have an impact on your location's workforce strategy. Beyond this, slowing economic growth and flattening interest rates. So two of the large ones, UK and Japan, they officially announced their news of recession. And by the way, this challenge is knocking at the doors of multiple other countries as well. So again, a theme which one needs to be aware of when they are entering into new market or having operations in that market. Beyond this, Gen AI. Gen AI is a theme we all want to touch upon. It is obviously opening multiple avenues to generate new business, multiple avenues to improve your service delivery. But at the same time, governments are globally wrestling on what is the right regulation and around the usage of Gen AI. And the last theme, which is a very common theme we are hearing in the market, is that countries are globally contemplating that if during such uncertain times, is it more good if we have things, if we promote local employment and reduce the overall global dependency? So a lot of things that one should be aware of. And with that, we took a stab at this. We regularly have this an annual update of the risk across the location. And this year, when we were plotting the risk heat map, one thing that came out to our eyes was that it's a lot of reds that we see over here. By the way, it's color coded into 3 different color shades. So the green one means it's a highly favorable. There are limited challenges. The amber one means that it's a favorable location, but there are some concerns. And towards red means there are significant challenges that need to be addressed. So we saw a lot of reds over here. Definitely things are interesting for many countries, but I will just want to call out some of the major ones. So for example, within Africa, you will see Nigeria. Nigeria is a very promising location. We understand that the population base is huge. It's a next wave location as well. We speak about it a lot of times. But the risk appetite of that location seems to be something that needs to be on your radar when you start exploring those locations. And based on all this, one thing that we have seen that while the risks are increasing, during the same time, ally shoring, which was a theme of quite an interest, I would say 5-6 years back, is gaining prominence again. It's gaining prominence in a lot of news articles that we are actually tracking. And if you just look at US firms, so based on our center setup data, we understand that if you take only US headquartered firms, they have been gradually over the past 7-8 years, they have been gradually increasing their reliance on their friendly shores or ally shores. And over here, their ally shores are primarily India, Ireland, Mexico, Israel, Canada. And the stance, by the way, based on our conversation, the stance is always that, hey, ally shores is something that we can always rely on. In between all these rising geopolitical tensions, those supply chain disruptions happening, we believe that ally shoring is something that provides us the necessary business resiliency in the time of uncertainty. So again, this is one of the key themes we are seeing, that ally shoring is on the rise during the times of geopolitical uncertainty. And with this, the third one that we are seeing right now in the market is around the demand patterns, the talent demand patterns. The talent demand is evolving globally. One thing that we have seen across all the shores, across all the countries, is that the absolute demand number has dropped when you start comparing to the glory days of 2022. But at the same time, demand persists to be very high for some of these specific roles. For example, if we have done a distinction on this page by IT, information technology, and finance and accounting. In IT, when we're looking at the top 5 roles, which had the maximum talent demand in the offshore nearshore markets in 2023, we saw the likes of UI UX engineer, full stack developer, data analyst, Salesforce administrator, SAP consultant, all of these having very high demand numbers. And at the same time, finance and accounting roles like financial account manager, financial analyst, risk analyst, these are the roles that we saw the highest traction. Now, just taking a lens over here, you will see that many of these roles were not even in the top 5 or even the top 10 in 2022. So the role dynamics are changing. The requirement of roles, which roles you want in your offshore nearshore markets, that is changing. The demand as an absolute number is decreasing, but still there is a lot of demand for some of the roles in the market in offshore nearshore regions. Now with that, it's time for the next poll before moving to the next set of things that we have. We understand that all the global leaders have things planned for their center, but if you take a stab, then according to which offshore nearshore location do you anticipate will witness the highest headcount growth in this year? Okay. It's one geography is leading by a huge margin.
I think
Let's see
we gave away the answer too quickly early in the webinar.
Yeah.
With the but it's good to kind of see that what we did here from the key issue survey done earlier this year, late last year, still kind of holds true. We've got 100% people who responded to this question. Thank you so much for that participation, and have a clear winner, hands down kind of a winner here in this case.
Okay. So based on Parul's response, you must have understood which region is coming to the top. But yeah, so this is Asia Pacific, and this is what even our key issue study indicate. Based on our interaction with our members, this is the one thing that we are always seeing. And we have a few pages, by the way, towards in the next set of pages as well, which says that Asia Pacific, which is the answer, by the way, will continue to experience a strong wave of growth in 2024. And this is primarily driven by the likes of India, the Philippines, Malaysia. These are the ones that are going to experience this significant momentum. We also have a very interesting stat on the demand supply gap. One thing which we hear a lot of times is that, hey, in Asia Pacific, I think the demand supply gap should be the highest, but that is not the case. So let me first start. We have 3 regions over here. So Asia Pacific, Europe, and Latin America. You will see talent demand for IT services has dropped significantly across all the 3 different regions, especially for Europe. However, demand for finance and accounting, that has increased across most of these regions, and the maximum increase, by the way, is in Asia Pacific region. However, an interesting stat is when you look at demand supply gap. In demand supply gap, Europe and Latin America, they have the necessary demand in the market, even though the demand is declining. But the talent supply for IT roles, especially the IT roles that we are speaking on the previous page, the top IT roles that we see in the market, that talent is not available in the same quantum or in same size what you can see in Asia Pacific market, because of which the supply is limited. And that's why the demand supply ratio in Europe and LATAM, or basically the demand supply gap in Europe or LATAM, is higher in IT when you compare it to Asia Pacific. Now, how to use this particular information, that will be the next question on the minds of all the leaders that have joined today's discussion. So it's important for us to understand that each geography gives its own flavor of demand. Each geography has its own flavor of supply. So given the evolving demand trends, it is important for leaders to ensure that they have an optimal work placement strategy in place. And the next section actually starts talking more around what work placement strategy are we speaking about. But in general, just to give a high level idea, think of your IT development should be in one city, your IT infra can be in another city. So it's important to revisit that And equally important to revisit your demand estimates for 2024 and assess that if you have a demand estimate in mind for a particular center, whether you will be able to meet that demand or not. And if you're not able to meet that demand, then what is the strategy you're going to deploy to meet the unmet demand? Now, with that, we wanted to speak about now a lot of this, the previous slides that you are seeing, it's coming in from the platform Talent Genius, which is an AI-powered platform, a very robust platform which gives you a lot of intelligence on locations, peers, your talent demand. So we are giving away in today's session a very exciting offer that the first 15 requesters will receive a complimentary access to Talent Genius platform. And the reason we wanted to keep it only 15 requesters because we knew that this platform always gains traction. So you must have received this in your chat box as well by now. So please click the link in the chat and share your interest, and we'll get back on this one. Now with that, Parul, do you want to take the next few themes on this one?
Thank you, Sumit. And for everyone, both the links to the CTAs will remain kind of valid throughout the duration of the webinar. You can also request them later. So that's there. But yes, we felt quite charitable and had 2 CTAs for today's webinar. Coming to the fourth theme that we expect to kind of run quite prominent is we're declaring that the year 2024 will be the year of doing less, and all C-suite executives are going to focus on that in their own kind of merits and shapes and forms. If we move further, Sumit, so when you talk about in the key issue study, when we ask leaders, what are your key expectations? How do you expect to achieve the business objectives? Cost optimization remains top priority by leaps and bounds compared to all the other kind of expectations out there. And streamlining processes to optimize cost, running more of process standardization, running more of better utilization of data analytics, insights. There could be different levers to kind of achieve that, but the common theme is cost optimization. We are seeing GBS and service providers evaluating all possible levers that could be, say, tapping into lower cost locations, optimizing the delivery pyramid, hiring talent from adjacent educational backgrounds, because the fight for talent is strong right now in the immediate engineering STEM backgrounds, rationalizing support staff ratios, optimizing real estate, focusing on a lot of interesting employee retention kind of measures. But while multiple balls are up in the air and it may seem like a highly complex ask, a proficient juggler will realize that all these things are directly or indirectly related to one underpinning kind of aspect, which is workforce planning. When you look at strategic workforce planning, and by the way, a lot of organizations have started carving that out as a separate team in their overall organization because of the dedicated focus this requires. When you talk about workforce planning, it's broadly the way Everest Group looks at it is we've divided into 4 steps. One, you need to think about what are your design principles and scenarios, in the sense what are the elements that kind of bake in when you look at the overall workforce planning. So what's the onshore, offshore, shoring mix look like? What does the working model in terms of work from office, work from home, hybrid model look like, which will impact thereafter your real estate requirements and the catchment areas that you're able to tap into? What are your BCP guidelines, business continuity planning guidelines, the pace of technology adoption, particularly automation and GenAI, which will again impact the headcount requirements and the business growth sentiments that are coming in directly in sync with the enterprise. All of these pieces kind of help you create your as is scenario and understand where you are, which pockets mean, and the next step comes in to understand how does the demand and supply picture look together. When you're talking about the demand profile, then all these elements think about, what are the areas that is actually expected to grow, where you're investing kind of to meet the 3 to 5 year kind of objective. And then at the same time, how does the supply look in? What are the various factors that you'll be tapping into to get that supply? What are the skill set requirements? And not just at a, say at a function level or at a sub-function level. We're seeing organizations now doing this profiling even at a role or a skill level. It has gone beyond saying, hey, I want to scale up my IT applications team or cybersecurity team, I want to double the headcount. It is going further beyond and saying, hey, I'm going to need these kind of specialists with the experience of 3 to 5 years for the next in the X time period. So it's going very specific to understand which are the cities, which are the tools that we need to be tapped in to meet that objective. Once you've got step 1 and 2, step 3 becomes very critical. That is where kind of all the inputs that you've gathered, they start making kind of sense in the sense of what are the scenarios that you need to create. Like, hey, are you able to, what if you leverage source 1 and then kind of look at demand profiling? Are we able to meet the demand profile in that scenario? What kind of permutations and combinations need to be applied to look at what is the ease or the risk of implementation? What does it look like? The CFO will come in and ask, hey, what is the impact from a financial standpoint? Does it disrupt? What kind of investments are required right now to yield ROI later? And then there are more issues around agility, regulatory compliance, especially with the more stringency of regulations across different industries, and the kind of innovation that you would want to draw in. All these kind of influence how you're thinking about the different scenarios that will impact your workforce planning. As a result of steps 1, 2, and 3, we reach to stage 4 where you talk about, hey, in terms of my future state, this is the kind of integrated view in a grid line view what you have about your headcount. This is how the headcount maps to my skills taxonomy, in the sense of what kind of skills are required, how soon or late do I require them, what are the interventions and the teams responsible to kind of bridge that gap, and what different supply models are needed, and for to activate the supply channels, what are the action items that are required to meet that end state. The other piece that goes hand in hand with workforce planning, if we go to the next piece, is around how do you look at your overall portfolio. So if you've got different locations that are mapped into overall framework, if you could move to page 35, please. We talk about the locations portfolio management framework. What we've done is simplified all of these factors into 2 different kind of axes here. The x-axis, the horizontal axis, looks at the vitality of the talent and the operating environment. So what are the function agnostic trends? What are the function specific trends that are influencing the talent market? What are the operating environment nuances and the business environment nuances that influence how successful you will be operating in that region? So we talked about geopolitical elections before. That's going to be a massive disruptor in 2024. There are other pieces around the macroeconomic health, the development of infrastructure in that area, the connectivity, accessibility, education, safety, security. All of these kind of play their part when it comes to the overall attractiveness or vitality of a location. On the vertical axis, we talk about factors that influence a company-specific growth in that region. So what is your brand perception when you're out there in the market? How easy or how much time does it take for you to kind of ramp up when you're looking at different skills? So what's the ease of talent management in the market? And how much share of the market have you been able to capture as of now and plan to do that going forward? Depending on those, the different locations can be location function combinations, in fact, can be plotted in each of these quadrants. So locations that come up on the top right, basically where you've got a favorable talent and operating vitality, plus your market positioning or competitiveness is quite strong, are the locations that you would want to put your bets on, in the sense you can expand more, grow more. They're the safest investment because it's a green, it's a win-win scenario. The locations which are on the bottom right are the locations where the market conditions are favorable, but you can make interventions to solidify your competitiveness in the location. So more so in the watch and test, you can kind of have some sprinkled investments there that align with the tailwinds, and then kind of go about double clicking with the investment. talking about the left side of the grid here, on the top, we have locations where you see the competitiveness for your company in that market is quite strong. However, the operating environment may not be as favorable because of recent changes or some other changes. So considering what the investments are, so you maintain that basic level of investment, but exploit your position of strength. There are multiple players who set up operations in some of the new and emerging locations, which may not be very attractive to your peers, but because you were the first mover, you have that strategic advantage to kind of keep reaping on the brand positioning you've had and get the best of the best talent. Now, locations in the bottom left are the locations which may require hard decisions because your competitiveness in the market is weak, the operating environment may not be as attractive. So there needs to be active considerations about how you reduce your exposure in these markets. It could either be, massive transformation examples that you're looking at, or downsizing of centers, etc. So what we're recommending is each company looks at the functions they're delivering that in each location with that location combination and start plotting in this overall management framework. So that's one piece around the over piece around how you can look at cost optimization and still kind of do more with less. The next theme, the last theme that we have for today, is talking about the sourcing models. Now, we touched upon it. Hey, yes, the service provider market has been relatively steady or seeing lesser growth there, but CBS model, the global business services model, continues to kind of grow strong with the investments that we've seen, continues to grow, mature, and unlock new levers of value creation. In 2023, we've seen GBS organizations add more centers, expand scale in existing centers, increase their penetration, kind of build capabilities, thereby enabling them to add more value just beyond the arbitrage story. In terms of increasing penetration, we've seen organizations going up as much as, say, 70-80% when it comes to penetration in IT application development work, infrastructure work, and functions like finance and accounting, which was the earliest function to be adopted as well. In some of the newer emerging functions, say digital services, analytics, also we are seeing the examples of penetration reaching as high as 55%. Going forward, if you talk about 2024, the expected shift in the model, there's this kind of a skewed optimism towards the GBS model as opposed to the providers model. Now, if you were to look behind, like what are the fundamental drivers that are expected to fuel this growth, there are 5 different factors. One, you think about GBS, they're taking on a more strategic role in the enterprise, the propensity to retain your core functions in-house, and the kind of proof of concept that has been established already to kind of support on the digital transformation initiatives. Fourth, and also to kind of strengthen your resiliency in the kind of this VUCA world that we live in. The 5th piece is quite important, which is around the dissatisfaction with service providers. Now, what you see here is the simple rating chart on a scale of 1 to 7, 1 being highly satisfied, 7 being highly satisfied, 1 being highly dissatisfied, talking about the satisfaction scores enterprises have had with providers. We're seeing a major shift kind of happened in 2022 and 23 is almost at the similar range. Factors that drive a lot of this dissatisfaction have been around, there are multiple, the top 3 have been around, there is this lack of innovation. And if you were to kind of look that in more detail, it's also around the definition of innovation, how that has been defined, what providers are expected to drive, and whether do they have the remit on how to drive that as well. Second is around the entire time-consuming process, more slow decision-making, considering the fact that organizations want to be more agile. And third is around poor communication, stakeholder management, a lot of changes that have happened in the talent, in the teams that have been deployed because of the high attrition cycles, etc. So that connect seems to be much lower or weaker, resulting in overall dissatisfaction from service providers. Now, if you were to look at from a demand standpoint, and again, this entire analysis getting powered from Talent Genius, we were able to kind of look at how does the demand for enterprises look in comparison to the demand from that's coming in? And this is demand as in talent demand or the number of job requisitions that have been put out. So it's more of a leading indicator and not so much of a lagging indicator. And if you kind of break this down across the technology stack and the business process services, there's a very distinctive kind of a analysis that comes out. When you look at the IT services on the left side of the chart, the overall demand has declined. That's number one, both for enterprises and providers. It's also to do with the fact that there was a bubble of increased demand back in 2021 where everybody just wanted to grow their teams, etc. And that's now tapering off. There is more cautious investment that's going on. But the decrease in the delta in the decrease of demand is quite significant when you look at service providers, almost like a 30% decline compared to the enterprises, where we are, that hovered around at the 90% mark in H1 2023 and then got down to 81%. We're also, if you talk about 2024, based on the interactions we've had so far, this number seems to be improving, not going further down. But on the right side, if you were to look at the business process services, overall, the market has remained steady. We have not seen sharp declines like we've seen for technology. It's remained largely steady. And the difference of the delta between the demand that's been posted out by enterprise and providers it's quite small if you were to compare what's happening on the tech side of the business. It's largely been stable. We're not seeing a lot of drastic shift being announced in the sourcing mix, but we are seeing a very strong wave of insourcing, especially on the IT side of the house. With that, we wrap up the discussions of the themes that we wanted to present. I do see pages and pages of questions that we have during the presentation, and we've tried to answer a lot of them during the presentation as well, but we've got some outlined. Sumit, we want to start with some of these questions.
Yes, so there are so many questions. I'm just looking at these questions right now.
All right. There's this one question by Matt Rowley which says, any shift in voice talent that we see in India? Absolutely, yes, Matt. So what we're seeing is, if we talk about the talent in overall, there's a lot of demand that's being pushed. One on the supply side, that continues to remain steady. We're not seeing a lot of changes from a supply angle, but from a demand angle, there is more willingness for the enterprises to leverage tier 2, 3 cities for a voice work. We're also seeing more technology investments coming into this space to kind of automate as much as possible. And since kind of India and Philippines lead the market when it comes to voice operations, they're impacting these regions more significantly.
There is one question that I'm seeing, and it's coming out quite many a times, that the trend Parul you were showing on the previous slide, and let me actually jump to that slide. So is this trend specific to any geography, or is it more like a global scenario that you are seeing in the market?
Oh, so this is an overall, so the analysis that you see here, this is across 40 odd offshore nearshore locations. We are seeing that trend even in onshore locations, just that as of now, that data is not supported here, but we're seeing this across the globe. Particularly if you were to talk about APAC market, the IT in-housing is kind of on a significant increase. In Latin American market, we're seeing a lot of IT work being in-housed, especially in the market of Mexico. In Europe, we're seeing more stable mix kind of. They're not seeing as drastic shifts as we are seeing in other kind of markets.
Thank you, Parul. There is one question, and Amir, I'd like to have you answer this one, given you track this a lot. In what ways do you foresee remote work shaping a lot of these workforce location decisions going forward?
I think Sumit, there has been quite a bit of shift in the way companies have perceived remote work. Let me go back year back. So in the late 2022, there was a strong push on promoting the remote work, citing decentralization of work, work-life balance. But as we enter 2023, and especially in the last 6 months, we have seen a complete shift in the notion, and across both service providers and enterprises, they're trying to bring back employees back to the office, citing productivity loss, cultural loss. So I think this will be very interesting to see in the next couple of months or next couple of quarters how this spans out. But primarily, what we have seen is that a very strong push, especially from the service providers, in the last 2-3 months. So it will be interesting to see in the coming months.
Thanks, Amir. Another question I'm sent by Esther says, are you seeing an increase in offshore centers for marketing kind of work? It's come up with some of our clients. Yes, yes, Esther, we are seeing increase in marketing work as well. In fact, there are examples of India-based BCC centers kind of setting up marketing COEs and driving a lot of work for their overall global enterprise as well. But overall, the trend in terms of there's more reliance, there's more openness, that the work that's coming to the offshore centers and particularly to the GBS, GCC kind of organizations. All right. I do know there are more questions, and apologies, we're unable to answer all of them right now. But what I would request is we will kind of answer them later as well. For now, we do encourage you to take a moment and visit our blog section, reports portal for related content, or you can navigate via our homepage of our website. There are lots of information based on the regular discussions, interviews we keep on doing with enterprises and GBS organizations. We've got reports, POVs, podcast briefing, blogs, many other resources to help you on the journey. And we'll be following up with all of those who expressed interest in taking up the offer. And the question that came up multiple times is, yes, we will be sending the deck as well. So that will be available for download for your, for downloading. A big thank you to all who joined us today.